Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, today I am excited because I have one of my friends, Ashley Pitzer, with me, and we're going to do a little interview style today. And what's going to be fun about this, too, is Ashley is also an author. In fact, she just is having a book coming out. So, depending on when you're listening to it, and we'll give you all the details later. But I love authors because I've written books as well. And I know lots of people out there want to write books, right? But a lot of people don't write books. So, we're going to talk a little bit about some of her story. And like with every episode, you just never know where we're gonna go, right? So the fact that you're listening to this right now means there's something in today's episode that you need to listen to and that you probably need to share with other people as well. So make sure if you haven't subscribed already to the podcast, do that. And when you get done listening to this, send out a review on whatever podcast player you like and make sure and share this episode with other people that you care about. And with that, let's go ahead and roll that episode in 3, 2, 1. Hello, Ashley. get the little
Right.
in the background, right? I don't know if anybody could even hear that, right? I need to get my little noise machine out for that kind of stuff.
So
Applause.
everything's digital now. You got to
I
have these
know.
buttons that you just push.
I know. You just push that. But I'm still kind of old school. It's like you hook up too much stuff and then something can go wrong, right? So
Mhm.
anyway, well, I'm excited to have you on.
I'm
I know
excited.
you've I think you're still in the process of it somewhat too, but excited to talk to you about your new book, right? And again, wherever else we're going to end up going on here. But I know as we were chatting beforehand, right, because I've written several books, a lot of them are kind of technical in nature, but I have about half of a novel done that's been sitting on the shelf for 13 years now. So at some point I might pick that back up and actually work on it, but I think you were kind of the same way, right? So maybe
Yeah.
just kind of start off talking about, because I know lots of people want to write books and lots of people have maybe started some, but how did that kind of go for you?
Well, I just absolutely love the synchronicity between what you're saying right now, the number 13. So, actually, when my second daughter was born, she was born with a rare genetic disorder. Of course, we didn't know that until she was about 8 years old. We just knew that there was something that was malfunctioning in her body, and her body didn't operate the same way. And so I had this beautiful career in risk management. And then I became a caregiver and going to all of these counseling and whatever, physical therapy, speech, well, not speech at the time, that came later. But anyway, the whole point was I had to help move her body for her, and that became my life. But during that time, 13 years ago, because she's 13 years right now, I
Oh, so
wrote
yours was 13 too?
yeah, that's what I was saying. I love the synchronicity of this. So 13 years ago, I started writing a book called Walking Towards You. I got to over 100 pages. I know that. And then
Yeah.
I put it down and I stopped, and I've never gone back to it. I have gone through maybe 5 computers over this 13 years, and I
I
have
know you keep moving it
transferred
forward.
it.
I've got my Scribner, with all the
Yeah,
stuff in it, and yeah.
I have transferred it over and over and over. And so I would tell you that the book that I wrote now, The Birth Challenge, which is going to be released end of February, is a different book altogether than this Walking Towards You. I'm a different person now, but I still have intentions to go back to that one from 13 years ago. I have wrote others as well that maybe only got 5 pages or 10 pages or maybe 30, and those, for whatever reasons, computer crashes, I didn't get to save those, but I treasured that one that I wrote from 13 years ago. But yeah, this one that I did for the birth challenge was something that came to me during the pandemic when I was laid off from my job. So my whole career with working has been very yo-yo-ish, in the sense that I would go back to work, I would get reestablished in the workforce, and something would happen with one of my 2 children that was kind of on the catastrophic side that required me to be home.
Mhm.
So I was constantly recreating myself, but I held this dream of being a fantasy writer. I remember going to my college roommate's wedding, and I remember at that wedding talking to somebody and being like, my dream is to write a fantasy novel. And the person I just so happened to be talking to was like, oh, really? I just got done writing about one, and it's about aliens. No, 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 no. And she was going on and on and on. And I was like, crap, she did it.
Synchronicity again, right?
Right? Right. And so, but this was years ago. I didn't even recall, because I've done so much soul searching and digging in this process. I didn't even recall how this was my heart's desire and how long I've carried this dream. Like I can actually explain it to you. This right here, this is a 10-minute writing exercise that I had to do. I took lots of creative writing classes in high school and college. So this 10-minute writing assignment, I found this. This is another synchronicity. I found this like 2 weeks ago. It was in the bottom of all of my pictures of all things when I was searching for my husband and I just celebrated 20-year anniversary. So I was looking for one of our, we've been together since I was 16. So I was looking for one of our first
Okay.
pictures. And there I find this journal, right? And this journal, I look up and I'm like, oh, here's a 10-minute writing exercise. And you had to write about everything to do with writing, why you could be a writer, why you couldn't be a writer. In this thing, I wrote that I wanted in 5th grade when I went to camp and you had to tell everybody what you wanted to do for your career. I wrote that I wanted to be a writer. I wrote that I wanted to be an author in 5th grade. I didn't even remember that BS. I didn't even remember it. And even the stories that we tell ourselves, because I'm also like, I know we kind of talked about this, right? But I'm also a hypnosis person. So I didn't even recall this memory, but do you know what I did recall? All the reasons I couldn't be a writer.
Mm.
I had
Hmm.
all these beliefs of why I couldn't be a writer. And even in this paper that I was, flashing up to you, was this belief system that I was writing about that, hey, I was mute as a child. So I was also one of the people often that are, empathetic. They usually have some trauma in their childhood, right? I had an abusive father. And there was a lot of messaging about not talking. So when I grew up, I was mute, and it was out of fear of talking. I was so scared to talk because talking meant that I could be abused.
Right.
So I grew up not only being shy, but not talking at all. So I had to go to special classes to be able to talk. And do you know when those special classes were? They were during English, when you learn how to write and how to talk and everything. Well, and then later on, in 4th grade, I was invited to start doing orchestra. Well, orchestra, they took you out of English. So my entire elementary school, I missed English class. So I had all these beliefs about why I couldn't do it. I don't know how to spell. I'm not good at grammar. You know, I just had all of these things like I wasn't trained in this. Nobody's ever encouraged me. Nobody's ever, stroked my ego and said that I should be a writer. So I had all of these things that I had been carrying around, all these stories that I've been carrying around. And in the meantime, I had this desire. And this desire came up at different points in my life to be a writer. But I just squashed it down, squashed it down, squashed it down. And I remember telling my husband at one point, I was like, I really think I could be a writer. I think I could quit my job and be a writer. This is before my second child was born with her genetic diagnosis, and then I quit my job. So when this happened, I was like, I'm going to write. I'm going to do this. And then I let life get in the way. I let circumstances get in the way. And so every single time I quit a job, I would start writing. If you had that week or two between your jobs, I would write. I was constantly drawn to it. I had one of those little voice recorders that you just don't have anymore because you have your phone.
Oh, I got two of them.
Oh, you have two? These voice recorders that I would carry around with me because I would be driving and an idea would come. I would have a dream and an idea would come. It was always there. And I just ignored it and I just shut the door repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly. Well, then Then my crashing point in life, when my Titanic ship of my life started to sink. Everything accumulates for a reason. So at this point in my life, my husband, as I became, this is kind of a messy story. So when we had kids, I was not religious before, but having kids, all of a sudden we needed to raise our kid up into the religion that my husband had. So all of a sudden I adopted this, well, I got to be this like Christian faith woman, right? And so I have to look this way and I have to act this way. And I adopted this. And during this time, I lost a lot of my personality, a lot of my shine. I dimmed down completely because I just became this submissive person. I reverted back to that child that I was with my dad, who was abusive. And my husband started to act more like my abusive dad. No, he did not hit me, but there was like emotional abuse. There was like covert narcissism. There was all of this stuff because he reverted to his dad. Once we had kids, we started to step into these different roles that we weren't. And so he started to act like his dad. I started to act like my inner child from my younger days. And I became quieter and quieter and more submissive and much more of a peacemaker. And I was just keep my head down, keep the peace, don't say anything. And this is what I did for a really long time. And the more I became a peacemaker, the more angry and upset he became. And so I have this special needs child. My older child all of a sudden got to a point where he was hitting his adolescence. And so he was shifting from that child to being in his own autonomy. And he wasn't getting autonomy because my husband was getting controlling. So he started to get suicidal and he had made several attempts. And all of a sudden, my world just flipped because I got this notion of, you know what? I may accept him treating me this way, but I'm not going to lose my kid over this, right? And I just went AWOL. I was like, I signed up for a toxic abuse program. I started registering with life coaches. I mean, I hit the books hard on changing my life, changing my perspective, changing my story. And I, because of where he was in toxicity level, I had to be very cautious about how I presented leaving him, but I was under a time clock because every 3 to 4 weeks, my child was attempting suicide. So there was a rush to get out the door and to get safety. So in this time, do you see how messy the story is?
Well, no, but it's yeah, because we're gonna keep going there because I had a child that a couple of times tried or threatened, but not like every 3 or 4 weeks. That's like a holy shit, kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's good though too, because it shows, again, showing what you went through helps others see that maybe what they're going through is not that different, but also how that can become the catalyst for where you are now.
This was my wake-up call. This was 100%. Having Esme with her rare genetic disorder, it created a lot of fear for me early on because we came so close to losing her so many times. She would have these life and death seizures, and I never knew. Any morning, every morning when you came to get her, I didn't know when I was getting her out of the crib if she would be breathing or not, because she would have terrible night seizures. And I used to have her sleep with me because I just needed to know she was safe and that she had a heartbeat. So I already had this experience of almost losing a child repeatedly. I mean, I came home one day, I went to yoga, right? I went to yoga before I became a yoga instructor. And I was like, I told my husband, I'm like, I just have to get a break because I was like the 24 caregiver. See, that was the other part of the story. My husband couldn't at that time mentally adapt to the fact of having a special needs child. So he didn't participate very much. He kept his distance. So I went to take hour yoga class. And it's at the end of the yoga class, you turn your cell phone off because you can't have any interruptions. And I get my phone as soon as class is over. and he tells me she's had a seizure and she's not breathing. He doesn't know what to do. I ran home, right, as fast as I could in my car. And we just had a brand new medicine to try to revive her when she has these type of seizures, but apparently it didn't work. And she was gray from lack of oxygen, right? I mean, like, you have these moments. So when my second child, my oldest child, kept having these attempts, it was like, no, I'm not going through this again. Like, I will do whatever it takes. Like, that was my attitude. And so, and I just got to that point where I knew I was drowning. And that's what I told my husband. I was like, I'm drowning. I can't be the one to save you. I can't be the one to help you regulate your emotions anymore. Like, and he was just like, just keep trying, keep trying. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done. So I knew that I was leaving this relationship through this toxic program. And there's so much secrecy going on in my life at this point, because you have to leave safely in case you get super violent if you leave. And so I had signed up to do medical coding, because I was like, I have to have a career where I can stay at home in case my kid has seizures and needs to have a day home, in case, at this time, my older kid was having so many attempts, he wasn't even in school. He couldn't even go to school because it triggered him so much. So he was home with me all the time. I had my other kid that was in and out depending on the type of seizure they were having. And I was like, I have to have a career where I can sustain my kids, like I make enough money and that I can stay at home. And I was already a fitness instructor. I managed gyms, and I was like, this makes sense. I know the body. I'll just do medical coding. So I spent thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars. I spent a year training for this. I didn't even enjoy it. I didn't even like it. Every day I had to pep talk and do my affirmations and just get through this, because I thought this was going to save my family, and I thought everything, but I was dying on the inside. It's just, I couldn't tell because I wasn't paying attention to myself. And so I had finally got to the point where I asked my husband for a divorce. He moved out. I finished my school. I didn't talk to him for 3 months. I finished the school. I had started 2 weeks in my non-paid internship, because you have to have so many hours of doing this job, right? I was going through the interview processes, and I had signed up for TCP. It was week 1 of TCP. I had done 2 weeks of my free internship. My husband and I it's 3 months had already passed, so we were starting to talk, and he was willing to work on things. He agreed to sign up for a narcissism program and go into deep therapy, right? So these are the shifts that were going on. And first week in TCP, the question that got me was, if I already had $5 million, what would I do? What was my vision? And it was like being possessed, in the sense that, like, so much flew out of me when I was writing. It was like this paragraph that was like this big, and I was writing for like 2 to 3 pages because my vision was there. I want to write a book. This book is going to be as big as the Star Wars and Harry Potter and like Twilight and these big books. I was like, this is my calling. This is what I'm meant to do. This is what it is. And it was just like, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I thought about it, because when I was laid off for 3 weeks during the pandemic, I had started writing. And I started writing this book about a character named Sabina, who felt very alone and isolated in this world. And she didn't know why she couldn't connect with people. And she's 3 days away from her birth challenge. Now, when I started writing this, I had no idea where this book was going. I just knew that these stories was flying out of me. These names of these characters were just coming to me. And I was just capturing what my intuition was giving me, streaming consciousness, right? So at that question in TCP, I decided right then and there I was done. I didn't like this career that I had chosen. I didn't know what was going to happen between my husband and I. I didn't know how to support myself, but I knew I wanted to be a writer more than anything else. And I just said, F it, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And I was actually in the middle of negotiations with a company that did stem cell research. They were a stem cell company. So I was in negotiations with them to get a job being a medical coder for them and to get out of my free work, that I was doing. And I had to go to them and be like, no, I'm doing something different. So I walked away from all of that time that I invested, all of that money. I walked away from everything. I walked away from the fact of not knowing if I could support myself, not knowing whether or not my husband and I would work out. I walked away from everything and I invested in my dream.
Well, I think that's great. There's several things that I kind of want to go back to and
Okay.
and touch on here a little bit, because I think it's, for those of you that because Ashley mentioned TCP, which is the Transformational Coaching Program by Jim Fortin. That's how her and I actually met. So it's a great program. Jim does great work, and I think that one of the questions in that first week of the course was, if you had $5 million, what would you do, right? Because
Mhm.
I think so much of the time, and you kind of explained it, well, how am I going to take care of my family, right? How am I going to support myself, especially now, if I'm going to get divorced, we're separated, I got to find some way to provide support for myself and my kids. And I see this over and over and over again. I'm guilty of it myself, as well, where a lot of times we're worried more about how are we going to make money? How are we going to pay the bills?
Mhm.
And we end up sacrificing and not doing what we
Yeah.
really want to do. And
Yeah.
so I think what's interesting is, again, you shared that story of, you held it up there, right? There's the evidence. When you were 10 years old, you said you wanted to be an author.
Yeah.
That question that triggered you, again, probably a year or two ago now, when you first started,
Yeah.
about 2 years ago, probably, I
It
think,
was it
right?
was September of last year. So
Okay, so
it,
just
we're
just over
one
a
year.
year. Yeah, just
Yeah.
over a year. But that question, you went right back to that same thing,
Mhm.
right? Which is interesting, because again, it's what sings in your heart. And what I was going to share, because we were talking synchronicity before in 13, right?
Yeah.
And as you were telling your story and showing, what you wrote when you were 10 years old at camp or wherever it
Yes.
was, I remembered myself sitting in my basement bedroom, and I was either 13 or 14 years old, cutting pictures out of magazines that represented some of the characters that I wanted in my books,
Oh
right?
my gosh, I love that.
So that I could look at them and kind of describe them, and all of that kind of stuff. So clear back there, right? That was something that was of interest to me. And again, maybe I do need to pull that thing off the shelf and get going back on it. But what's interesting, and I've seen this from a lot of interviews that I've done, a lot of people that I've coached, is a takeaway for everybody listening. If you don't know what you want to do, right? Or there's a lot of people, especially in our circle, that are like, what's my dharma? What's my dharma? Right? And dharma
Right.
is like your life's purpose. Well, if you want to figure out what your life's dharma is or what your purpose is, go back to what you dreamed about doing when you were a kid,
Yeah.
especially from the ages of about 10 to 15, probably somewhere in that range. What was it that you really wanted to do? Because for both Ashley and myself, it was be an author, right? And so it's kind of like, so what the fuck am I doing right now? Well, I'm still writing.
Right.
I'm still writing and I'm doing videos. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. It's storytelling. I'm still doing storytelling, right? But just with some different mediums as well. But yeah, maybe I'll go back to the book as well. But that's where I don't know how many times I have talked with people, and that's what it is when they finally, right, go through whatever crucible they have to go through. They come out the other side realizing that they always knew, and it was typically something from childhood that
Yeah.
they knew they needed to do. right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting too, and I thought it was funny because again, you know, it's going to be the next Star Wars, it's going to be the next Harry
Yeah,
Potter, it's going to be the next
absolutely.
Twilight, right?
Yes.
Well, what's interesting, two of those three people that wrote those books, guess what they were?
They were not writers. They
They
weren't, that's
were
not their
they were
career.
not writers, and in fact, J.K. Rowling, she was a single mom. Same thing. How am I going to put food on the table? I don't know. She's the richest woman in the UK now, worth billions of dollars,
Yes.
not knowing how to write
Yeah.
necessarily, but she just did it. I think I can't remember the gal with Twilight, but it was kind of the same story. If I
Stephanie
remember right, I
Meyer.
think Stephanie Myers. She was
Mhm.
is she the one that was a professor, or she didn't? I can't remember what she was doing before, but it was the same thing. She wasn't an author, right?
No, she
But
had a dream. She had a dream about this, and that was it.
well, and it's in what's funny here is when you talk about, and so we kind of pause the story here, so let's get into a little bit more, and I think also too that the name of the book, The Birth Challenge, it's not a
Yeah.
book about giving birth to
No,
babies, okay? It's not like a maternity book, but there's
no.
there's a reason behind it. You're going to tell us what that is, but what I think is interesting too is the minute that you made that choice, made that decision for yourself, things started happening, right? So, like you said, you this character named Sabina
Mhm,
that felt alone and isolated. Sounds
mhm.
a little bit like Ashley when she was younger, maybe
Oh, every
too.
one of these characters resembles
Yeah,
a part of
yeah.
me.
And so let's get but what happens is, and this happens, music, art of any kind, and really even from a business perspective. I mean, it's every aspect of our lives is the minute that we finally feel aligned and we make the choice and we start moving forward, it's like the floodgates open,
Yeah,
right? And so instead of beating yourself up saying, "Well, I can't do it. I missed all these English classes when I was a kid. I don't know how to write." It's
yeah.
like I say, fuck spelling, fuck grammar. It doesn't matter anyway. The computer will fix the spelling errors.
I
Grammar,
hired
d-
2
grammar
editors.
doesn't even matter anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, grammar doesn't matter, right? People don't care. Um, but things just started happening. So, what were some of these things that happened? I mean, obviously, you got a character's name, but what are some of these other things that started happening in this creative process as you started moving forward?
Well, I think so. I think I was really fortunate. And again, I think the universe was just waiting for me to open up this door within me. So when I would sit down to write, the lining of my life was that I had decided that I was done with this religion practice, right? And so I started really reaching into more of a spiritual practice. So when I would sit down, I would light a candle, I would set my intention. So every time I sat down to write, I would light the candle, I would set the intention. My intention was always the same intention. So it was, may this book entertain, inspire, and heal people through the transformational lessons that each of the characters go through. I asked for this book, when people read it, that they could relate to one or two of the characters and for them to really feel like this book gets them and to help them feel like it's like a best friend. Like they know me. This book knows me. This character knows me. Like that's what I wanted people to feel. So my entire writing process is like my book is very emotional. I've had a couple people read it. You know, you have your beta readers, and everybody tells me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, do you suck people in your emotions?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." So my whole writing process was always that. The other thing that I really learned to do was I gave everything over to spirit. So when I sat down to write, I really did just stream conscious. I wrote whatever came to me. I didn't question it. I didn't think about it. I didn't say, does that make sense for this character? What would this character do next? No, he would say this. Like I didn't get into my analytical brain at all. I shut it 100% off. And the other things that I did differently too, because I do know people that have written books and everybody's like gives themselves this word count. Well, then you're sitting there with all the stress. Did I make this word count? I did not operate that way at all. My goal was always, my intention always was I booked 2 hours because I know that the brain can maximize for 2 hours. So my goal was always 2 hours. But if the flow stopped at 30 minutes, I was like, I had peace with that. I was okay with that. I let spirit guide me 100%, and I did not make this about me.
Well, because I think that's what's important too, is that, as you said, right, every day as you sit down, right, and again, this is a great practice. I light candles every day with
Mhm.
intention.
Yep.
That's a great practice, again, for people that are out there. And even if you're religious, hey,
Say it
religions
to
light
God.
candles. You can do it too, even if you're religious. It's okay, right?
Mhm.
But you had that intention, and your intention the whole time was not to make money, but your intention was to connect with people and help people identify with the characters
Mhm.
and help them transform themselves as they see the characters transform themselves
Yep.
in the book as well, right? So it was done with a pure intent. And I think so much of the time, like we were talking about with the job, so much of the time we're all like, well, how am I going to make money doing this? And you were like, I'm just going to write a book with this intention. And again, Ashley, I'm going to say it right now. I hope you make billions, girl. Right?
Me too. Me
I
too.
I I hope you are the next, whoever, right? Because again, it wasn't your intention, but as you're helping people and people are feeling that and they have that emotional connection to it, then obviously the universe is going to compensate you and help take care of you temporally as
Yeah.
well, right? But you're not writing a book, and again, you can kind of tell when people do this, like the people that are trying to write a book that's going to be commercially successful at the time. It's not the same as when, the energy just flows through, either in your own experience that you're sharing, people like Hemingway,
Yeah.
that I like, some of the people like that, or whether it is like a stream of consciousness coming through. Because, I just watched all the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings shows
Yeah.
again. Tolkien.
Right. That was on my list with Harry Potter and with
Yeah, well, and because
Star Wars.
Tolkien had no idea. He came up with uh new fantasy characters that never had existed before. But now, as you step back, and especially if you look at it from a cosmic and spiritual standpoint, it's like, imagine this, a bunch of people called elves that come from another planet
Yeah.
to Middle Earth
hmm
to save the men, and working with all of these other beings and the whole light versus darkness play, right? It's like that came through that man from the universe. He
Yeah.
didn't just make all that shit up.
Yeah.
That actually came through because there's so many different things in that movie now that I watch as an older man, and I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Right?
I
Because, and a lot of the times the artist has no idea, right, what they're actually doing. They don't realize the full significance of what they're doing because they're just allowing it to come through. And so I'm glad to hear that that's exactly what you did, right?
I'm actually really excited because one of the people that I had asked to read my book, kind of a spiritual mentor for me, told me this was definitely kind of given to you as a gift. And she was like, I'm going to tell you why later, but I can't tell you right now. She was like, but I 100% know. And I was like, what? You can tell me curiosity gets to you. I'm like, but I will wait and I will be patient to know who did I tap into? What did I tap into? Like they know. I'll find
Mhm.
out one day.
You'll find out one day when the timing is right. So,
Yeah, exactly.
right, but the important thing is that you let it come through,
I
right? And
did.
again, I mean, that's to me, that's the true nature of art. And because true art, there is a connection with the greater, right? The greater universe, God, source, whatever people want to call it. But
Mhm.
it's something that comes through us. And the reason it comes through us is because people in this world need it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They need it. And so okay, so talk a little bit about, because I wanted to hear too, because you said, Sabina shows up and she's 3 days
Mhm. From her
before
birth
her birth challenge. So just explain kind of briefly. We don't want to give away the whole book, because again, everybody, you can get on Ashley's wait list, because the book's not quite out yet. It might be by the time that you listen to this, depending on when you listen, and we'll put all the details in there. But I want to read the book,
Thank you.
as
Thank you.
well.
I'm so excited.
But kind of talk about that, because I know, we were joking a little bit beforehand. Your husband hates the title, The Birth
Mhm.
Challenge. It doesn't necessarily reflect, again, when you said it, I'm like, I thought this was a fantasy novel. Right? But what is that in the context of the book, and kind of what that means, right? So that people can kind of understand, oh, again, the title was given to you by the universe, so you just go with it, right?
Yeah, so that
But
was just it. That it was given to me by and I don't know that I fully understand it either. So I'm going to just be honest with you. This is what was delivered to me. It makes sense to the universe. I put it down. What I can understand about it is that so the birth challenge is a way of revealing. It's a spiritual ceremony that takes place. First of all, let me back up and say that this is a kind of a sci-fi in the sense that this happens in the future after we have a nuclear war here on Earth, and there's few remaining survivors. And the only reason that there are few remaining survivors is that they somehow inherit supernatural abilities. Nobody quite understands why. And there are 8 supernatural abilities. And these people saved what existence was. Now we're 300 years fast forward, and Sabina is about to face the birth challenge, which is a spiritual ritual where if you haven't already shown signs or started to progress in having a supernatural power, this is the test that determines it. So you have it since birth, but it doesn't always show up until you go through this rite of passage, which is where you transition into adult. So in this world, from 0 to the day before you turn 16, you are considered a child and your parents take care of you. But once you go through the spiritual ritual, and if any supernatural abilities come through, that's when they're going to show up. But even if nothing comes through, there is a second part to this birth challenge, and that is how you are going to serve the world. So you get to choose 3 things to get tested on, and then that's where you go and either pursue it or study it. So there's a lot. This is a whole world. So much came through to me. So do you want to say
well, and
something?
and and so again, I mean, because yeah, anyway, we can talk later probably about it, but I'm interested to read the book, because again, just as you're talking, I'm putting a bunch of dots together in my head.
Okay.
And what's interesting too, and again, what I love about it is you don't fully understand what you wrote or why
No,
you wrote it.
no, I don't.
And because you don't fully understand why or what you wrote it, it came from somewhere else, right?
100%. I know it did. Even as you're
Yeah.
talking, goosebumps are flushing my body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a reason, because people need to hear this, right?
Yeah.
You need to hear it too. You were just the medium through which it happened, and eventually you will understand, I'm sure, the
Yes.
deeper meanings to it. And
Yes.
this is probably again one of those things where people will be able to read it at the surface level, and it's a nice story.
Yes.
People will be able to read it at an emotional level, and it will help them connect. It will maybe give them hope. It will help them to make some different changes in their lives. But there's probably also even yet a deeper level, which is at the spiritual level, where it will affect people in a certain way, and they will see the encodings and the
Yeah.
things that are there that 99.9% of the people will never see because it's not intended for them to see it, right? And I will tell you, so for example, like I said, I literally just went back and watched all the Hobbit movies and all the Lord of the Rings movies again.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just we watched the Ring of Power on Amazon, and I'm like, huh, okay, we got to go back and watch. And in watching all 6 of those movies now, with how I've learned and grown and developed, there is a lot in there
Yeah, you're gonna make me want to go back and watch
that
this.
is much deeper than 99.9% of the people will ever get, right?
Right.
But there's it's out there. So I'm excited. Like I said, I want to read this.
Oh,
And I
it's so
want to
good.
see what's going on, but it's also a testament to you as an artist to allow that to come through, right?
Yeah. I say my thanks constantly. That, in a way I feel like I was chosen. So I'm like, thank you. But it was also just, I mean, if we go back to that Dharma, right? When you're doing what you're meant to be doing, things come for you. Like what you're seeking is seeking you.
Mhm.
So there's a reason why even when I was 10 years old, I was seeking to be an author.
Mhm. Well, and there's a reason why you were born into the family that you were,
Oh, yes.
and that you had the experiences that you had, right? Because not only again is some of that channeling through, but for you as a person to experience, being alone and isolated
Mhm.
also allows you to much more closely identify with the character and write that more authentically, right? Because I always like to say, it doesn't matter whether it's fiction or fact, or what's it, fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah.
Everything that is written is autobiographic.
Hmm.
There is a piece of
Oh, yeah.
every
Yeah.
artist in everything that they do, right? And
Yeah.
so what people are going to start realizing more, and this is one of the things I've started to say, is science fiction is really science faction.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. I mean, that's
And
kind of one of my mottos
and
too.
fantasy is more real than
Yes.
reality.
Yes.
We
This is
just don't
actually one
have
of my messages.
we just don't have the blinders off yet.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So all of these post-its that you see on this wall back here, this is all of the downloads that I have been getting to write a book on spirituality. So a
also
nonfiction
that's
book.
that's next in the work, huh?
You don't even understand. I'm in trouble because these downloads come to me so much. So even since writing this book, I had a dream about another book, which I've written down the substance of it so I can go back to it. Um, I've already started writing the sequel to this book too. And then this started coming to me, and I have more post-it notes. Like I have a whole stack here, like a whole stack. Look at all this, a whole stack of
Mm-hmm.
more like downloads coming to me on this writing the spiritual book. And then like 2 nights ago, right, I was like, oh, I had a dream. I had a dream, and in this dream, I was only given 2 names, Saren and Daphne. And I woke up and I was like, I like I say I have to, but I'm compelled to. I have a story now with Daphne and Siren, and I don't know what it's about. And I tried to resist this. I tried to resist writing on this. I was like, no, 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 I already have so many writing projects. But I was like, you know what? I got an hour and a half of downtime. I'm just going to sit down and see what their story is. Bam! The story blows up in my face, and it's so freaking good. And I'm like, now I'm in love with this story. I'm like, now I want to write this story. And I'm like, and the thing about it is I've gotten this vision. I've gotten this vision and I've gotten these spiritual nudges that I'm going to be on a stadium, something like an opera house. Like I see it in my vision, and I'm talking to people. And all I know is I'm coaching and doing hypnosis and talking spiritual stuff. So because of this, I have been nudged, and I went ahead and after I wrote this book, became a hypnotist and became a coach. And I don't have time for this, for this stuff. But I know it's coming down the road. Maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10. I don't know. I just know that I needed to do it. And I know that it's going to play a part in my future.
Well, I think that's the important part, right? Is that we never know until we know
Yeah.
why. But when we feel we need to do, and then you will figure it out later. Or maybe you won't. Sometimes I think there might be some things that maybe we go through this entire life and we have no fucking clue why we did it. When we cross over, it'll be made clear to us, right? And sometimes it might be years and years and years, right? Because I love that old Stanford commencement speech that Steve Jobs did, where he said, as you're going through life, you can never connect the dots looking forward. You can only do it when you pause and turn around.
Yeah.
And as random as all of our lives seem to be, when you're standing in the right place and you turn around, all those little fuckers line up, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, how did that work? And so, good on you for listening and just doing and seeing where this ride is going to take you. But it's going to be an exciting ride for you.
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoy my life a lot more, letting go of all the control and just showing up, feeling the nudges, taking inspired action, and then just letting everything else work it out, like not having to figure out everything. Because when I sat down, here's the thing, when I sat down to write, I know enough about people, like in the process that they go through, where they write out what their characters look like, they write out the personality, they, whatever. All of that stuff came to me day by day. There was stuff that I wrote in chapter maybe 3 that came to play in chapter 10. And I was like, oh, that's what I wrote there. Even as I wrote, it was an entire trusting process and I had no idea. And so when I first worked with my first editor, they're like, you're probably going to change a lot of things and this and that. And she was like, so as I'm starting to edit this book, if there's any changes that you want to make, anything pops up, anything you want to correct, you just let me know. And I was completely blank. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. This book is complete, So I've had different editors read this book and nobody has come back to me asking for any changes to be made other than my grammar. And I will say that they said that I could, because I'm such an emotional writer, I should just open up with my emotional statement instead of easing people into it. So I did change that. Isn't that interesting? And they also say that
It doesn't, you know what? It doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
But if you were trying to write it analytically,
Yeah.
it'd be much harder. You'd be going through a whole bunch of edits and other stuff too, right?
Right.
But because you're allowing the flow to come through, even when you don't understand, like you just said, right? I wrote something in chapter 3 and I had no idea what it was or why it was, and all of a sudden, chapter 10, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
That's not from you. That's coming through, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it doesn't. It's easier. You're loving your life more,
Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
got a lot of work ahead of you with all the different post-it notes that are all around.
Somehow that will come together.
Mm-hmm. Oh well, I have no doubt. I have no doubt. Well, all right. So let's. I know we end up liking to talk, so we got to cut it off for today. But we might have to have you back because I had a lot of fun. If you had a lot of fun too, right?
Oh yeah, I would love to. That'd
Kind
be
of
great. I would love to read
geek
you some
about this.
too.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you want to do that, you want to read a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, let's do
What
it.
would you like? Would you like the beginning paragraph, or I just chose a random thing randomly in the middle of the book? I'll let you pick.
Well, how about the opening paragraph, right? Because that'll hook people in so they can go to your website, ashleypitzer.com, and we'll put it in there and get on the wait list so you can get the whole book when it comes out.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this, and I'm super excited about the sequel. I'm in love with all of these characters. I love them.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, all right. So as sadness rested like an ocean on Sabina's chest, big, vast and full of tidal waves that crashed and beat against her heart as if it was as insignificant in its power. This sadness was, once again, brought on by her father's impending departure, which always elicited a set of stacked questions. Questions Sabina didn't want to acknowledge, but constantly teased her mind. Questions she couldn't bear to know the answer to because she feared what they would mean. And questions that also had the potential to give her the validation she so desperately needed. Hugging herself tighter as her soul wept, Sabina looked out over the still pond on another perfect day. It was not lost to her that her soul was as invisible to her as her presence was to the world. Even in nature, with serenity all around her, Sabina was unable to remove the pinched eyebrows, the stiffness of her crossed arms, or the roundness of her spine as she burrowed into herself, protecting her fragile heart from the brutality of the crashing waves.
Boom.
Yeah.
I mean, just even in that first paragraph, it's like we could pull that thing apart. There is a lot of things in that first paragraph.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. They say you should start off with a hook, but I started off with emotions.
Well, but it puts
That is the hook.
everybody in there, and it is a hook because it's like, why is she feeling this way, and what is it? And even some of the lines in there about the questions. It brings up all the kinds of questions and questions we don't want the answers to.
Mhm.
Well, how much of the time do we not ask ourselves certain questions because we don't want the answers to it, right? I mean, it's like everybody can relate to it, and just even in that first paragraph, there's a huge amount of wisdom
Yeah.
and learning for people that they can relate to.
And I'm very grateful to have written that book.
This is good stuff. All right, Ashley. So I know the book is going to be out soon, um, and so people can get on the wait list now. I know again, got to get to it. For any of you that have written a book, if you haven't written a book, then just realize it takes effort to get through all this stuff. But within the next couple months, this is going to be out. And again, depending on when you're listening to this, it might be out already. So check the links to be able to go. But how's the best way? So for people to reach out to you, to get on the wait list, to figure out.
I finally did that tree link business, where you sign up and it has all of your contacts in one place. So I will
Wow.
send that to you so you can put it in social media, because then it will link you to everything. It links to my website, to my YouTube, to Instagram, to TikTok. It links to
Perfect.
everything. So, and I mean, I've even been considering, it's such a low value, just in case you ever wanted to know, it's like $5 a month and I can create the wait list right there too. So it's one link and it's bam, everything.
Huh.
So, but you
Yeah,
can,
send me that link, and we'll make sure and put it in the what do you call them? The notes. The notes. Those
I
things,
know.
right? Those things I have to write.
Well, I'll be excited to hear if you end up pulling out that 13-year-old novel, and the person you are today could fly through that novel.
Oh, I'm sure, and yeah. I just got to figure out where I don't know, but again, all the synchronicities, right? I
Right.
mean,
I
and the fact that we're talking together today, same thing. A lot of things going on that way. So, Ashley, thank you
Thank
for
you.
spending time with me today, and congratulations on writing the book, and I guess congratulations on the tsunami or the waves that will be crashing over you now, with all of the other stuff that you're getting in downloads that needs to come out of you as
Yeah.
well.
Very excited about my future. And I loved being on your show, and I loved telling my story, and I am so grateful and appreciative to you.
Well, thank you. And thanks to everybody who listened, that hung on until the end. Because again, as I told you at the beginning, when you hang out, there's something for you in every episode, and the fact that you listen through means you got something out of it, right? Which means you probably will on the next episode as well too. And I think Ashley has a podcast too, so you can go check that one out as well, right? To get all of the things that you need, because that's so. Ashley, thank you. And yeah, I look forward to having you back. I think
Sounds
we're gonna have
good.
to do that.
All right.
All right, thanks.